The summer months can be so much fun, but it can also be a little bit crazy. With my time being taken up by so many things, it can be hard to find time to paint. But I feel like it is still important to squeeze that in. So lately, I've just been trying out some more loose and free-handed style pieces like this one. I didn't really expect much to come out of it. I was just having some fun, but it did turn out better than I expected. So I thought I'd share it with you today so you could give it a try, even if you're short on time as well. So to get started, we just need a piece of watercolor paper. Really, any size will do. Every once in a while, I enjoy cutting my paper down to a square shape to change things up a bit. This is just 9" by 9". Then, although we will be painting this in just a loose, fun, and free-handed way, I did make some light marks or 3 spots with some rough circle shapes for the center of where I want my flowers to be. The first one is literally smack dab in the middle of the page, with then just 2 more, one just above that and one down below, more off to the right side. I did also draw just a few lines around the edges as well, where I thought it might be nice to put some leaves or branches of flowers or things, but to be honest, you really don't need any of this. In fact, I ended up not following a lot of these lines anyway, but if you decide to add some light pencil lines on your page, I do recommend leaving an open space around the flower centers without any pencil. Our flowers are going to be very light in value today, and I didn't want a lot of pencil lines showing through there. Then, of course, we need watercolor paints, a paper towel, clean water, and some brushes. I'll be using some filbert brushes today for a lot of this piece. These are brushes that will be included in my upcoming subscription boxes, which I'm excited to say will be ready hopefully in just a couple of months. So make sure you sign up to be notified when they are available with the link that I will post in the description of this video. I have here a 3/8" filbert, a number 5 round with a nice pointy tip, and a 1/2" filbert brush. And just as a side note, I will leave links and information to any of the other products you see me using today in the description of this video as well. Now I'll just quickly tape my paper down and we can get started. All right, let's go ahead and pull some colors out onto our tray. Now, because it's summer and it's bright and sunshiny outside, I think I'll be painting this with some nice, bright, warm colors, but really you can choose to use any colors that you want to. First up, I have some Azo Yellow. I'm going to add extra water to this color though to keep it nice and light in value. This is going to be the lightest flower color on the page. It's almost even white. That way it's going to stand out really well as the center focal point of the piece. I'll also pull out some gamboge to use as a shadow color on this flower. Now, using this 1/2" filbert brush, I'll take some of this really light yellow color and come in here to the very center of the page and start painting in some petal shapes. Now, these are very light, so it may be hard to see what I'm doing here, but don't worry, we'll be painting some darker yellow ones in just a minute that you will be able to see a little bit better. But all I'm doing to form these petals is starting at the top of the petal, then I pull the brush stroke in towards the center of the flower, and at the same time, I turn the brush slightly from the broad side to more of the thin side to make a finer point at the end. Now you can just paint one of these strokes for a single petal shape, or you can combine a couple together and make it a little bit more broad, just whatever. In fact, you can also make more thinly shaped petals by just painting them in with more of the thin side of the brush as well. Then after I have these petals moving all the way around the center of the flower in a nice circle, I'll take the number 5 round brush, grab a touch of the gamboge yellow paint, and add that into the center area while the paint on the petals is still a little bit wet so that the colors will blend and spread out into the petal a little ways. In fact, to add a little bit of extra detail to the petals, you can even use a touch of this color and spread it out into some thin lines along these petals like little vein lines. I really like what this adds to the flower. And I might even just add a little bit more gamboge in the center again to emphasize that color and make it just a little bit darker. All right, this is a great start. Now, the idea here is to paint in color around this flower to help it stand out a little bit more. So let's paint a couple more flowers similar to this off to the sides of it now. I'll stick to this larger 1/2 inch brush and paint a flower in just like we did, only this time we'll use the darker gamboge color on our tray. If you had a hard time seeing that last flower and the brush strokes I was making with it, you will be able to see them better with this one. Also, you'll notice that I'm painting this flower in so that it looks like it's underlapping the first one. I'm just keeping them nice and close together to make a close-knit composition. To help fill in the edges of the flower a little bit, I will just pull out my number 5 round and just paint these last few petal pieces in. We only see little parts of them, so I'm going to paint these in around the first flower. Now, doesn't that look nice? Let's go ahead and add some darker color to the center of this flower as well, just like we did with the first. I'll just pull out a little bit of raw sienna. This is going to make a great shadow color for the gamboge. And don't forget to add in the vein lines if you want to add a little extra detail as well. I am loving this so far. Let's continue on. I'm going to go ahead and paint another one of these darker yellow flowers up above the light yellow one, but this time I'll switch over to the smaller filbert. So using the 3/8 inch filbert, I'll start painting this one in, again in the same way as before, painting it in the same way underneath the lighter yellow flower. This time it will just be a little bit smaller in size. I'm so glad you are joining me today for this. I hope you're having fun with it so far. If you find that you are enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming tutorials. You know what? I think I'll paint one more like this just for fun. I may not have much of a center on this one though. Maybe it's more of a side facing or back facing flower just to change things up. All right, this is a good start to this piece. Now we can start painting in the accent leaves and flowers to finish this off a little bit better. But actually, before I do that, I think I will pull out a few soft, light valued green colors to maybe paint in some background color to fill out the space and emphasize that light valued center flower even more. Really, you can use any green colors that you want here. I think I'll use a few different ones to give it some variety, but no matter what colors you choose, keep them very light in value right now. We need to be able to paint accent leaves and flowers over the top of this later. Maybe I'll try some olive green mixed in a little bit with some of this gamboge on our tray. Then I'll have some pure olive green and maybe even some sap green. Again, this is all with a little bit of extra water and less pigment to keep them light in value. I'll paint these background colors in using the wet on wet technique, so I'll go ahead and take some clean water and fill out an area with just water first, and then we'll start adding in the color later. I've decided to use the number 5 round for this so that I can paint it in and around any flower petals that are already painted on here. This can just get into some of the small cracks and crevices a little bit better than the filbert. And as far as where to place the water, that choice is really up to you. You can try whatever you like. I don't think I'm going to take mine clear out to the edges of the page though. I'll keep them more in the center for a more close-knit look, keeping the edges a little bit rough or uneven, but really you can do whatever you'd like. Just remember that wherever you place the water, the paint will have the potential to spread to that area. So only put it where you're okay with the color going. All right, now that I've got the water down, I can start adding in the green paint. I'll just use a variety of the greens in this space, just wherever or whatever I think might look good. That is the fun of this piece. We just get to kind of play it by ear. In fact, a lot of times when I'm just playing around with paintings or different techniques, I don't even have my camera turned on. But then sometimes I get things that look really good and I wish I would have recorded it so I can share it. So I'm happy I recorded this one today. It's not necessarily a masterpiece, but it definitely was a lot of fun to do and turned out better than I thought it might. Okay, not too shabby. Let's try something kind of different and fun here. After all, we are just playing this by ear. Why don't we pull out and add to a little section of the background paint by creating just a very subtle leaf shape coming out from here. I might try it more down near this bottom corner, and I'm just pulling the color out onto an area where the paper is dry so that the leaf shape will be a little bit more defined on the tip, but the back end will blur into the rest of the green background. I really think this is so neat. I love the subtle effect that it gives. And after we're done with this, then we'll go ahead and do the same background look on the other side of the flowers. As I'm adding in these subtle hints of leaves into this background area, I may just go ahead and toss in a few more around the main flowers here and there to help fill it out a little bit more. This is really coming together pretty nicely, I think. Hopefully I don't mess it up now. But before we start adding in the small leaf and flower accents, we do need this background area to dry completely first so that they don't all just run together. But while we wait, maybe we can come back into the larger flowers and finish off the centers of them. I'll just pull out a little bit of burnt umber and maybe a touch of ivory black as well. Then using my round brush, I'll start dabbing in some dots of brown color into the center areas of each of these open flowers. Nothing too fancy here. If you want to emphasize the centers even more, just take a touch of that ivory black and add that into the very centers of these as well. This can kind of just add an extra little bit of depth. All right, I think my background paint is dry enough to paint over, but before you move on, make sure yours is too. Let's go ahead and add in some small little flowers or flower buds next. Maybe I'll throw in a couple of gamboge buds using the 3/8 filbert brush just to tie this color in a little bit into the background area. Again, nothing too fancy here. We don't need a lot to create these, just a couple of simple strokes of the brush. I think just 2 of these closer to the top of the page would be sufficient, but like I say, you are more than welcome to add them in wherever you like. I think I'll go ahead and just change the flavor of my color just a little bit now and add some alizarin crimson to some of the gamboge that's already on our tray. I am going to have it a little bit more heavy on the alizarin crimson rather than the gamboge though. Now using that filbert brush, I'll add in a few buds with this color. I might try a couple of different types, maybe some that are a little bit larger like the yellow ones that we did, but I'll also try some that are smaller in size like clusters or bundles that are painted in more of a row so that I can connect them with a stem later. And just as a side note, a lot of the strokes you see me using here are just very similar to how I created the larger flowers, starting at the top of the petal and then pulling and turning the brush just a little bit to create a point at the end. But with these smaller ones, I'm just not having to move very much. It's almost more like a stamp of the brush or something, very minimal movement to make them smaller. Or if you need to and you have one lying around, you could also just switch over to a smaller filbert brush also, just whatever works. Okay, that might be enough little accent flowers. Let's go ahead and move on to the leaves next. But keep in mind, you can always come back in here and add more flowers later if you need to. Now for the leaves, I will once again be using a variety of green colors, but to start off with, let's get a little bit crazy. So far, the majority of this painting is fairly warm in the temperature and look, so let's change things up and add a touch of cool green leaves in here first. I'll just create a mixture on my palette with Hooker's Green with just a little bit of ultramarine blue mixed in to create a nice cool blue-green color. I'll use the round brush for these and just load up the bristles with color and start painting in some more rounded off shaped leaves first. I'll just start with the tip of the brush to make a point, then I'll pull out and push down to make the stroke thicker and more rounded off at the end. Basically the opposite of how we've been using the filbert brush, but I guess that's what makes all of the different brush types so much fun to use though. Now again, go ahead and add in as many or as few of these as you think you might need or want. Just keep in mind that we will be adding in some other colors and sizes of leaves in just a minute. So maybe keep it to a minimum for now. Like I say, we can always come back in and add more if we need to, but once as you've painted them in, you really can't take them off. The other thing you'll want to make sure that you're doing right now is painting these colors darker than that green background we initially laid down so that they stand out and show up. Okay, I'm actually having a bit of an impulse moment right now. I really probably should wait until the end, but I already have the color in my brush, so I'm just going to go for it. Why don't we try a few blue-green splatters in the background just for fun? I'll take a scrap piece of paper to cover up the larger flower areas or places where I don't want the splatters to go. I'll load my brush and simply tap it against another to splash some dots of paint around my page. These are subtle and add a fun touch to the piece. In fact, I may even just paint in a few larger dots or circles of this color as well, so that I have the look of some bigger splashes too. And as a side note, if they ever look a little bit too dark, you can simply dab off a touch of the color using your paper towel, and that's just going to lighten them up a little bit. All right, moving on, let's try a few hooker's green leaves next on here. I'll paint some of these in a similar shape as we did with the blue-green leaves, but I think I'll also start to change things up a little bit and have some with more pointy tips too. Again, just whatever you want to try. We're just playing around and having fun here. No pressure to have it turn out perfect. This is just a great piece to experiment and learn from so that you know what works or doesn't work for the next painting. Okay, time to change up our green color again, I think. Let's add in some olive green next, and this time maybe I'll transition the shapes of the leaves to be more grass-like looking, longer and thinner with points on the ends. Well, looking at it, we might need to add in some larger leaves in here. So let's try a couple of those out to add a little bit of size variation. In fact, I may even add some small and larger splatters of this green color as well. I mean, why not? All right, I'm happy to say that we only have just some finishing touches to add and then we can call this piece done. Last up, we need to just quickly paint in some stems for these accent flowers and leaves. And you know what, I might just pull out my #1 rigger brush for this part to make it a little bit easier to paint in these thin lines. I'll just go ahead and use this green paint that's already on my tray and just work my way around the page, adding in the base of the flowers followed by their stem lines. And as I move around the page, I'll throw in any stems that look like they need to be added. I don't have too many actually, so this shouldn't take too long or be too difficult. Just some nice thin lines. In fact, if you want to, you can also add some thin grass-like lines in here just as another fun little accent as well. And that, my friends, I think is it for this painting. This was so much fun to do. It has a really fun, bright, and happy summery feel to it. I'm so glad you joined me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.